We know about the great destruction of Nalanda University, right? All the great centers of learning, which were magnets for students from around the world, they were attacked. In Nalanda, it was just catastrophic. The Brahmin teachers, the Buddhist teachers, they were all massacred. To the point that nobody was even left. All the Hindu centers of education had to be disbanded in those brutal years of Islamic rule. There was a well-equipped library, a multi-storied library in Nalanda, and all the books were burning for months and months. So this was the kind of thing. University after university was destroyed by the invaders. In fact, after the Islamic invasions happened, the status of women went down. So they could not be going out like before, they could not be dressing like before, and at the same time, their education got affected. We must understand, when the British came to rule over India, they realized that the people of India are very literate. So they went about in a very systematic way in changing the education system to control the people and prevent mass unrest. Today's world, when we talk about modern education, there's a lot of buzzwords that are used, like whole brain learning, experiential learning, flexible, discussion-based, learner-centered. Now, all these things that we are trying to bring in our education today, the modern education, was actually an integral part of ancient Indian education system, which was, of course, under the gurushishya parampara, where we talk about using both the left brain and the right brain, so that you are a good mix of a mathematical person and a humanities person, arts, fine arts. All those things were there in the Gurukula system, where the children had a very vast exposure to different knowledge systems, and all the out-of-box thinking that we talk about today was very much a part of the ancient Indian Gurukula system. So I think that not many people know, because most people think they were just chanting the Vedas and they were learning by rote. But what they don't know is that there was so much of discussion, so much of debate. So in the ancient Gurukula system, the guru was an embodied book by himself, and the students didn't need books to read. The guru had everything, and just by following the guru, shadowing the guru, observing what he did, the way he talked, and spending as much time with the guru as possible. The guru could, of course, be both male and female. So being with the guru was a way in which the students learned. And even while doing daily activities, the guru would share nuggets of wisdom or explain certain concepts in more detail. And the students would learn without knowing that they were in a class. So it was not exactly classroom-based learning. It was learning at all times by just being with the guru. So you see, we must understand, when the British came to rule over India, they were very smart people, and they wanted to see how they could control the masses, the population. You know, it was a huge population, and they had to use their resources, and they didn't want them to protest. So they realized that the people of India are very literate, very educated, unlike the other colonies that they controlled. So unless they change the education system of India, there is no way they are going to control the people and prevent mass unrest. So they went about in a very systematic way in changing the education system. So that is how we had a lot of discussions in the House of Lords, in the Parliament of England, where they discussed how can we change the education system of India. One of the things that they needed is that they needed a lot of Hindus to join the army, a lot of Muslims to join the army, because there were just a few British people living in India. And if they had to control India, they needed the Indians themselves. Now, if the Indians were studying in their own native languages in the Pathshalas, then they realized that they're never going to feel loyal towards the British government. So this is actually mentioned by Charles Trevelyan, who was the brother-in-law of Macaulay, the infamous Macaulay of the Macaulay Minute. And Charles Trevelyan said that if we keep educating them in their own languages, then the Hindus, if they study Sanskrit, they will always think of their own culture and their own civilization as being greater than ours. So it's very urgent that we need to teach them in English medium. We need to introduce them to European learning, European sciences, so that they feel very grateful to us that we are giving them this knowledge. And our heroes will become their heroes. So Shakespeare, for example, all the heroes of the European world would become the heroes of Indians, and they would not be quoting the rishis, they would not be quoting their subhashitas. So that's how they decided to focus on the Pathshalas and make them redundant. So when all these English medium schools came about and the government jobs were going only to the people with education in Indian English medium schools, then these pathshalas naturally dried out. Also, the people who used to donate to pathshalas now were no longer able to donate because the British policies ensured that poverty kept rising and rising in India. So no one could donate to the schools like before. And so when donations stopped to the pathshalas, then there was no way they could flourish like before. And that's how Indian education system slowly moved towards what the British wanted. They wanted a nation of clerks who will do their every bidding. The British would occupy the top managerial positions, whereas they would have the Indian lackeys doing their work. And that could only be possible by doing away with pathshalas and having English medium education. And you would be surprised to know that even after the British came to India, it was noticed by G.W. Leitner in his book, when he was in fact one of those who was very sympathetic to the decline of India's education because of British rule. And he noticed that even if there were people who wouldn't have good standing in society, they would want to donate to educational institutions because that was the way to earn merit. So everybody, whether it was a farmer, whether it was a rich money lender, everybody donated to educational institutes. And that was a culture. I mean, the custom of bhiksha was very prevalent. Any student, any teacher could just stand outside any house and the householder would have to come out and feed this person. All the universities of the time were being funded by the society. So Nalanda had got the revenues of 100 villages, and that was used to provide the bedding for the students, the medicines for the students, food, anything that they might need was provided by the society. And temples also were centers of education. Temples were not just places of worship. Temples were also places where classes were held. Since people donated to temples, the temples would use part of the money for education. Now today we have a situation where temple money is being given to the government, and so the temple money is not necessarily being used for education. So that's why we have all these, the corrupt education leaders who charge a whole amount of money for coaching. That was not the case because we always knew that knowledge is sacred. Ancient Indian education was also very skill-based. So people learned a lot of skills as they were in the Gurukula. They would learn cooking, they would learn stitching, they would learn lots of things which was probably not even counted as a subject. So as they were learning all the mathematics, all the shlokas, all the Vedas, they would know so many other things. Whereas today, if you look at students, even after they graduate, they have no skills. They are unemployable. The other thing was that it was very seamless. The various disciplines were not segregated to the extent that they are today. Like we have various subjects and they are segregated. It was all very integrated. So for example, when you're studying mathematics, it would already have poetry in it, for example. So the shlokas the theorems that you learn would be in the form of poetry. So you can imagine Bhaskaracharya, for example, one of the greatest mathematicians that India has produced. If you look at his mathematical works, they're all poetry. And people are marveling at the poetry as much as the mathematics in it. So that kind of education where it was seamless was found in ancient India. But today it is very segregated and very compartmentalized, and people are working in silos. An engineer would probably not know much about poetry unless he comes from a family of poets, then maybe. Otherwise, it's not part of the education system. The other thing is that at a very young age, the children would be very proficient in ancient times. So, say by the age of 12, 13, they would already know a lot. Okay, whereas today, even at 24, 25, they are still just beginners. So that the level and the maturity is also different. If there is time, I'd like to also tell you about the brahmacharya, which was very important in the Gurukula system, in the ancient system, which is missing in today's world. So brahmacharya was a building of character. Students would learn how to control their desires. Of course, even that time they knew that teenagers, there'll be lots of desires that they would have and attraction to the opposite sex. All those things were handled during the brahmacharya period. And the students, the male students especially, would be made to understand that all these desires would be satisfied later in life, but right now, channelize all this upwards to your brain, to learning, to knowledge, and do not yield to these lower desires. At this time, you should only be focused on studying. Now, that was a very important part of education, which is totally not there today. Because today the students who grow up, they have access to everything. So I think that is a big difference. That today I feel that we have a lot of problems in society. We have corruption, we have crime, we have all kinds of sexual deviancy. And I feel this is a result of the absence of brahmacharya, which was very much a part of the ancient Indian education systems, because the guru was like a friend. We know about the great destruction of Nalanda University, right? All the great centers of learning, which were magnets for students from around the world, they were attacked from the 11th, 12th century onwards when the onslaught happened. In Nalanda, it was just catastrophic. The Brahmin teachers, the Buddhist teachers, they were all massacred to the point that nobody was even left to tell Bakhtiyar Khilji, the guy who attacked Nalanda, to even tell them what was in the books that they found. There was a well-equipped library, a multi-storied library in Nalanda, and all the books were burning for months and months. So this was the kind of thing. University after university was destroyed by the invaders, and the teachers and the students fled. There was no way. Those who survived, they just fled with whatever manuscripts they could carry. So some of them fled to Tibet, for example, from Vikramshila, and they wrote the accounts of what they faced over there when the marauders arrived. And all the Hindu centers of education had to be disbanded in those brutal years of Islamic rule. And many of them fled to South India, some of them fled to Kashmir. So wherever they could, the areas which were outside the Islamic influence, they went there and they tried to set up the education institutions there. But eventually the Islamic onslaughts came to all the other parts of India as well. To Kashmir, they reached Kashmir as well. And we hear about the destruction of the centers of learning. Sharda Peeth University was destroyed. It was one of the foremost universities of India, where people went from all over India. From southern India, they would go to Sharda Peeth to refer to some important manuscript. So Kashmir University's books were destroyed. Same thing happened in Varanasi, even under the Mughal rule, which many people make it seem like it was a benign rule. But temples were destroyed by Aurangzeb. Even Shah Jahan did that. So that's why what happened is that the original ecosystem of learning that existed, whereby everybody was focused on getting a good education, all people were looking at which university to send their children, which Gurukula to send their children to, all that vanished under the Islamic rule. But then it hobbled back slowly because they, wherever they fled to and where they set up the smaller centers, eventually they tried to come back. So that's how it happened. There was a big blow, a body blow inflicted on India's education system during the medieval period.